Hey peeps, I'm Michelle.
Hey everyone, I'm Natalie.
Hey, what up? It's Faith.
Hey, Sydney.
Hey, it's Kat.
Hey, it's Bria.
Hey, it's Lori.
Hi everyone, it's Karina.
And this is the Red Lips and Mic Drops podcast.
Red lips and mic drops, thick hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk.
All right, everybody, we're back with episode 3 of Red Lips and Mic Drops, and we have a new member with us today. Well, she's not new. She's been here the whole time. Sydney Smith, how are you, my love?
Good. Finally here. So excited.
We're so happy to have you on the first EP for yourself, but it's the third technically. Okay, I'm going to get right into, I'll share this and we'll get into the freaking wheel. I can't with the wheel. Okay, here we go. The wheel of topics. Here we go. All right. I'm scared. Oh my God.
Oh
shit.
I knew that was going to happen. I saw it. That's the one.
Well, guess we're talking about sex addiction today. I feel like, how can we ever just go first? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this so we can get into the topic today is sex addiction, y'all. I don't know who provided this topic, but thanks. Where do we start with this? Where do we start with sex addiction?
I can talk a little bit about it.
Yes, our psychologist, please do.
So I actually have a little bit of experience with this within my own clientele, but also I won't use them as a reference, but I do provide consultation to one of my friends that also has a client. So it's kind of removing myself from the situation. And I just want to talk about like our different perspectives of his sex addiction. So rather than his sex addiction itself, which he has some like indecent exposures, he has some really, edgy practices that he participates in online and gets into some chat rooms where there's a lot of sexual activity that occurs online. She more or less took an approach like, oh, wow, like this is something that's going to lead down the wrong path, potentially into, prison, because she and I both have experience of working in prison. So we have a lot of experience working with like deviant behavior. And even though it's classified as deviant behavior, I typically go below the actual behavior itself and look at like, what is his behavior saying and what is he trying to get across? And, this person has had some sexual abuse in his history. And it was apparent to me that he made meaningful connections to people through sexual activity. Like I feel this way about myself. And the only way that I can connect to another human being is by offering my sexuality to them, because no one has ever showed me that they give a crap about me otherwise. She's like, I want to transfer him out. And I'm more or less like, wow, that'd be an interesting guy to work with, because I can remove the actual behavior from it and listen to what his body and what his mind is saying about the situation. So it's really interesting how the different approach is.
This is like, I think I just don't know what to say right now, because I think people have addictions and they don't realize it. Like the porn industry, and that doesn't mean that this is involved all the time, but I feel like it's I don't know, people have normalized it so much, and it's not that it's wrong, right? Like it's not that it's wrong, or it's some people like they do. And I don't know what to say. I don't even know what to think about it, because I'm not educated enough on the addiction, and also the fact that people think they're not, but they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what I was going to say is that one thing that we don't realize, because I've actually gone through this personally, so I'll share my story with you guys. I don't care. I am an ex-sex addict. So here we go. Here's my topic.
That's
and
awesome.
I think one of the biggest and most important things to know is that hypersexuality is a trauma response. So not ignoring the fact that it is a trauma response, and it doesn't necessarily mean because you're sexual, you're bad. For me, it was just that I didn't have the capacity to understand intimacy outside of sexuality. I was not taught when I was a child. It was, you don't ask questions. I'm the adult. You're the child. You stay quiet. And I never learned that a relationship meant building curiosity between you and another person, along with my sexual trauma. So I think that's a really important point to bring up. And I'm sure Michelle could have things that she would want to add to that.
I think it's also different for men versus women as well. Because women, it's not necessarily, for men, it's such a diverse and such a deep topic to bring in. It seems so superficial when it's said, oh, sex addiction, and everyone thinks to the porn industry, but it's not necessarily. Like, there's a lot of deep rooted things. Like when I was younger, I as well had sexual addictions and different things like that. I was trying to fulfill a need within me to validate my own feelings, to validate myself, because that was all that I knew what to do. It definitely is different, but for guys, I can't speak on their terms. Now, I did go through a very nasty relationship with a gentleman that was a sex addict. Like, it was horrible. And it was like I was expected to have it no matter what, when, where, why. It didn't matter who was there. Like, he cut me off from all family. He cut me off from all my friends. It was almost like I was his subservient slave. And it got to the point where, and this goes back to last week's episode, the shaming and stuff. So it got to the point where I remember him sitting on the bed, and he had pulled out his pistol because he used to be in the military and everything. And I had gained weight because I was on birth control, because I did not want to have a child with this man. I did not absolutely want to have a child with this man. And I had gained 20 pounds. And he had this pistol out, and he was going to kill himself because he could not fathom seeing me gain weight or doing all these things. And so I was at the breaking point at that time. I was like, I was done. I had had it. I was done with all of the trauma that he was forcing on me. And I just looked at him. I said, do you want to pull the trigger, or should I? Like, I'm done with you. This is it. And needless to say, he did not pull the trigger. I knew he was using it at that point in time because he had done it before. He was using it to get me to do what he wanted me to do. And when I figured out the game, I was done. Like, I was done. Our relationship ended. I walked away, and I've never spoke with him since.
Oh my God, Faith. And Bria, like, I'm glad you guys are talking too, because we were talking about the man thing, and everybody right away when they hear sex. See, I don't, because I've watched videos on it before. Again, I'm not educated enough to speak on it, but I've seen videos, and it's mostly women talking about it. But we all go to men. Like, it's like, oh, men, sex addiction, man. And it's not always the case. So I appreciate you guys saying that and speaking up and sharing your stories. But for those of us like me, like, how does one, and we obviously it's the past, right? The past relationships you've had and the relationship that you have with yourself thereafter. But how does it start? Like, do you guys remember when you started feeling like this is kind of an issue for me? I'm please ignore my ignorance, by the way. I'm just trying to better understand.
Yeah, I can speak on the level that I understand what Faith is talking about. It becomes a game in a relationship. And if that person stopped having sex with me, I was like, they don't love me. They're leaving me. I don't know what to do. And it was like, I felt like that was the only thing, the only glue that was in our relationship that was going to hold us together. So it took time. But what happened was it started sabotaging my life. Like, I just got miserable and depressed, and I would seclude myself with my partner for days on end, and we would just go at it, and then we would be completely drained and then get back to, and so it was this process, and you just feel yourself being drained, and you're like, oh crap. Or if they're not around, you're watching porn or whatever it is. You're just trying to do anything you can to get that energy flowing again, because it's what you think is love.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I think the reason that it's different, or it's classified or looked at differently for men and women, is that we see men as being perverted, and that women are doing this from a place of pain. So they're already kind of classified a little bit differently, even though a lot of the men come upon their addictions from the same reasons and ways that women do. It's just talked about more by women because we're more open about sexual abuse than with men. Men are shamed if they were sexually abused, more so than women.
I think it also goes back to the whole age-old thing of, whereas a woman, if she has sex, she's classified as a whore. Yep. Or if a man has sex, he's classified as, oh, good job, woo woo, high five, do it again, do it again.
I just said this last night. It's so weird that you're saying.
But a couple of friends saying like they have a son that's going off to college, and they like hand him a box of condoms, like, yeah, go have fun, live it up, this is the college days. But when a girl goes out to college, their daughter goes out to college, it's like, oh,
chastity
belt, sleep around, make sure you don't do this. It's like,
why make sure you wear this belt at all times,
right? Seclude yourself in your dorm and don't ever have any fun.
They're doing, Sex in the City is coming back, and unfortunately Kim Cattrall did not want to be a part of that, which is, hopefully they will find someone for that position, because she was the one of the only ones that kind of showed how normalizing women that have sex like men do was on national television. So, and the whole sex addiction thing, we see it all the time. We just had that reporter in the news that, remember, I don't know who it was, I forget his name. He was just let go from his company for masturbating on a Zoom call with the company because he didn't realize his camera was on.
Oh
so,
my God.
I think I've seen that on TikTok.
Yeah, it just happened like 2 months ago. And so it's people can have addictions to anything, right? Yeah, and they can replace addictions with other addictions, just like an eating disorder, right? Which I have had in my life. When you start to put your worth into that addiction, that's what it becomes. So a lot of people will use sex, like the famous line from Friends when Phoebe is telling Ross she uses sex as a weapon. Like, people will do that because it feeds their own self-worth. So it's just
that's what it is. I mean, really, that's what any addiction boils down to. An addiction I can definitely speak on. It's just a matter of filling a hole, and it starts, oftentimes it's addiction is a soul disease. It's dis-ease to the soul. That's what the disease is. So it's just a matter of what we decide to pick up to make ourselves feel better. Like when we're addicted to something, all we're doing is we're trying to make ourselves feel better. We're trying to use something outside of ourselves to fix something inside ourselves, so that's why oftentimes when people go to the rooms or to programs or to counselors and they try to fix themselves, they just replace that addiction with another. Like, I know someone personally who is addicted to anything, like pills, marijuana, heroin, cocaine, like everything. And when he came into a program, he did a 12-step program and he was in it for life, and he just replaced it with women. And then he became a sex addict. So really what it is it's just, what can I use that will make me feel better in this moment right now? And that's ego, that's self-esteem, that's the lack in spirit, a lack in spirituality, no higher power. Like it's those spiritual, where are my foundations, where are my roots, and those things that we lack. And that's why so often we see kids nowadays using video games and social media and things, because we are lacking spirit. We are lacking a connection to a higher power. So we fill it with whatever we can find, whatever's easiest to get. And in modern society, unfortunately for men, it's you're a cool guy if you have a lot of sex. Right. And for a woman, like, I've been raped. So I understand the idea of taking your power back and using sex as a weapon, or using your sexuality as a weapon. I'm guilty of totally avoiding sex 100% altogether, but still flirting my ass off because I get a rise and him getting a rise, if you know what I mean. So, but I don't ever want to go any further than that.
My parents, they never sat down and said, let's talk about the birds and the bees. Never. So it was always so uncomfortable for me growing up until I grew into my womanhood. And now I'm like, let's talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, I knew it was wrong when I was younger.
It's
knew
old
it was
school
wrong.
thinking. It's old school thinking. It's
Exactly.
old school thinking.
My parents, my mom, she was very disassociation, like with me altogether. I mean, because she was using most of my childhood, so she wasn't there.
Right.
But my dad was very proactive about it. I like to think he kind of talked to me like a guy most of the time. Like if I was in a bad mood or something like that, he gave me condoms. He was like, dude, you are in charge of your body, so take care of yourself. You know, tell him to wrap it up and get out, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
there's a couple of times, like in recent years, the last maybe 5-6 years, I've called dad having problems with a partner or something. He's like, well, when's the last time you blew him? You know, and I'm like, oh, okay. He's like,
I would
think
never
about
hear
it.
that
You
in
know,
my
when's the
household.
last time?
Like,
Yeah.
It
Or
would
he'll
have
ask
never
me
been
that.
said.
He's like, when's the last time you had sex, Squid? Like you're frustrated. You're not sleeping well. Go get off.
I love
You know?
I mean, good for him. And again, Sydney's dad. We love Sydney. But like my
He's
mother,
proactive.
I said like penis at Christmas one time, and my mother was like, "Oh," I'm like, okay, Roxanne, relax. Like you need to get some. I can't. I really can't.
What I think really helped me was to learn what intimacy actually was. And what I think that we're missing from this society is teaching and talking about what self-care actually is, which is actually practicing a state of intimacy where you come into an uncomfortable conversation or a situation and you come in with curiosity versus this triggered effect that you have. I'm not talking about this. I'm not touching it. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about a little bit into what is intimacy for real. And when we know it's not sex.
It's a journey. We should be talking about sex as casually as we talk about our day. Like we should not feel this pressure and this like these triggers. But when we have those conversations about intimacy, because to me, it's like, I like the journey of like, it's a lot deeper for me than just let's go get railed and let's, get it on. It's like, I mean, it's a lot deeper for me. And, I don't know. It's like an adventure.
So like there has to be like the quickies. There has to be like the long, passionate ones. There has to be like this open communication between the two people that these expectations are not just left unfulfilled because everybody has expectations. Yeah. You just have to know what yours are and then be able to confidently and comfortably verbalize them to your partner. And they have to do the same. So, and I think that's like the big issue. Going back to like episode 1, I loved the title of it. We're all manipulators. And I think women learn how to control their destiny, control things and get the things that they want by using sex as a tool. And so there it becomes like one of your, like those old school marketers, one of those tools in your toolbox to use and pull out when you need to or want to get something, which it's not right. It's not good, but I think that's our fallback because we're in a man's world.
Well, what is it, Bria? What is intimacy? Like to you, what is intimacy?
So to me, intimacy, I work with a lot of people that they hold down, they suppress emotions. They have no idea they're doing it. And really what intimacy is having those emotions, realizing they're there and being able to externalize that energy to somebody in a way that it can be received and framed well so that it's an I win, you win situation. And then this way we just clear the air. And that's true intimacy because at the end of the day, all the hard conversations that I've had with my partner, with my child, or, those things that I was like, I don't want to talk about, this is going to be terrible. We're assuming the worst. Right. And then when we come in there, we have that conversation and we clear the air. It just seems like you get that much closer to that person. So it's like creating this level of closeness, right? That's what I feel intimacy is.
So you guys don't know this history about me. So my husband and I, we separated for 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. And we reconciled almost 3 years ago now. So we lived very separate lives for that period of time. And at some point in time, we came together and had a conversation about either we need to actually divorce or we need to figure out what we're doing. And we had a really great conversation. We dated for a little bit and then we actually need to see a marriage counselor because we're just going to fall right back into the same habits that we were in. Mm-hmm. And as you were talking about, Bria, we were having those really difficult conversations about issues we had, concerns we had, history we had, anything that happened within our marriage. He knows about my history. I dated well. We were separated. He did not. He knows about that history. And just having all of those conversations and being able to take it out of what we were having with our therapist and have those conversations at home. We now, after, that was 2.5 years ago that we stopped seeing the therapist. And we now still will, yes, we have our squabbles, but that level of intimacy is still there because we know how to have those types of conversations and say, okay, and win-win, or this is not the hill that I'm going to destroy my relationship on. Like, let's take a step back and actually look at this and have the conversation about it. And I would totally agree that being able to have those conversations creates such a level of intimacy that we never had before. Never, ever, ever had before.
100%. Because when Keith and I, like, if Keith grabs my hand, if we're having it, let's just say we're having a disagreement about something, and he sits there and we're both like understanding each other. We're both sitting there asking questions and exploring the topic at hand. And we grab each other's hands and we say, I do understand. And, or if it's an apology situation, I say, I'm sorry. There's no justification. I'm sorry. Or he says, I'm sorry. That is like, to me, wow, man, that's like the healthy dose of love that like just really, it really gets my lady parts.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's kind of where I was going with it too, is like, I think in the very beginning, square one of intimacy for me is vulnerability, being able to, on both parts, because if I'm vulnerable and the other person has their walls up, it just ends with me getting my feelings hurt, so it's got to be open vulnerability and patience from both parties. And that is just, like, I was actually just said to Tommy yesterday, I was like, man, you've been helping around the house. We did some yard work. My sister is visiting and she's pregnant. So he's like tending to her every need and he doesn't even need to. And Kyle's like, Kyle's my sister. I call her Kyle. And she goes, this is a window into your future. And I was like, damn, son, okay. Like, let's start now. Yes. Yeah. Like, do those dishes, do that laundry. Okay.
Women take it, like Bria used to take it. If a guy didn't want her in that moment, something was wrong with her. He no longer loved her. He no longer, right? And a lot of men are depressed. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to admit that. And they don't want to tell their partners that. But then they have no sex drive. They don't want to have sex. And then they're not, it's a whole communication thing. Yeah. They're not communicating with the woman. I used to have a guy that abused me with sex, in the sense of he would withhold it from me to make me feel bad about myself. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes, like literally. I had that. Yeah.
Right. Yep. And so, but then I've been with people and that have dealt with depression, and I've dealt with depression, and they don't want to have sex, but because they don't know how to communicate that, or they're afraid to communicate it, you feel like something's wrong with you. Right. So it's that whole right. And then sometimes you find out that they're, I don't know, like Sex in the City, when Charlotte found out that her husband was like beating off, right? Like right in the bathroom, but not having sex with her. You're like, well, what's wrong with me? But you can look at a magazine. It's like the communication, it's still a taboo subject here in America, where I've traveled overseas, and there are countries that are like, what do you mean? Like, why are you guys so afraid of sex? Right? Like the French love sex. They love their bodies. They're naked all the time. It is not a big deal. And so I have a girlfriend whose husband just came out as a sex addict, and he was raised in a cult, and he got out of that cult, and then they are married with 4 children. And she's more of an acquaintance, and she talks about it like publicly. He's addicted to porn and all that stuff. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't even know it was an addiction. And it like almost destroyed their marriage. So and he was, again, raised in a cult, and I don't know what happened to him there. That's his story, but it could be that maybe he was abused in that cult through sex or stuff like that. So there's so much, people don't want to communicate to each other because they're afraid to, and they're afraid to admit, like, I don't have a sex drive right now because I'm depressed, or I don't have a sex drive right now because I'm burned out at work and I can't even like think about it. Or I have 5 children, right? Like we were talking about last week, and I'm exhausted from taking care of them. Can you just wash the dishes and not try to hump me? Right? Can you help out in the house?
Like one of the things when you said depression, I have to like just take this as a side note for a second. That was one of the hardest things in my life to say to my therapist, that I was depressed, like that I felt this severe depression. I was like, she's like, what? And, you know, of course she's exploring the questions. Michelle, you do this every day, but she's saying, why do you feel like you're not normal? And I said, because like depression's not normal. Like I was taught that you're really messed up. Like if you're depressed, you're crazy. Like you're absolutely crazy. There's something wrong, a screw loose in your brain. And I still battle with it. Like I have days when I don't want to get out of bed. I'm like, that's not, that's not necessarily normal. And my therapist said it's not normal, but everybody has been through some sort of depression in their life, whether they want to admit it or not, or they don't even realize that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I knew at some point, like I knew because I wasn't getting out of bed. And I'm like that. Didn't want to shower. The shower was the big one for me. Like not wanting to take care of yourself and wash your body. Like when you have the capacity to do that is scary. Like I didn't want to do that. Like that's a really alarming thing to go through. And you literally, it's like a weight is on your body. Like I'm not getting up. I'm not getting up. And it's awful. It's just a hopeless thing. It really is. Well, at least for me it is. Not for everybody, but for me it is.
But one of the points that I want to bring up too, when it comes to communication, I think one of the gaps that we're experiencing in our society and still in communication is the fact that men and women are different. Like we're having a really hard time admitting this because we're in this whole equality thing, but the reality is people are made up different. We think different. So when my boyfriend wants me to, explain something or to tell him something, it's an immediate, well, what do you want? He doesn't want me to go into the why I want it and the whole like shebang. He's just like, well, what do you want? Just tell me. Whereas I'm like, well, I want to understand it. I want to understand the complexities of things. And I think that's because I'm a woman. I could be wrong here, but.
Well, no, I asked my therapist that. Michelle, you've probably been asked this question too, and you can speak to it for us here. But I asked her, I said, I'm tired. I was so like triggered at this time. And I was like, I'm tired of people. And I'm still very much getting past this. I'm like the man woman thing, like my mom raised me to believe that men are all pigs, every single one of them. So I'm still working past this mentality that like literally not all men are pigs. And I have to remind myself every single day because my mother raised me to think this way. So I sat in my therapist's office and I'm like, I'm tired of these justifications for men. Oh, they're just guys. That's how they are. And I'm like, men, we're all the same, aren't we? And I was like, are they really different than women? Is that like a really scientific based thing? And she's like, it actually is. Men are very different from women and the way that they're wired is very different. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I needed this schooling. This is why people need to go to therapy or like someone that's a professional. It's so important because I was like, oh my God, it must be true that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Like that is a real thing.
It's true.
Men just want the bottom line and women want to connect.
Yes.
Yes.
That's like the easiest solution is that men the bottom line, like read me the last sentence of the email, and women want to have the full experience of the email.
Yes.
And also like a man that's not tapped into it like himself, right? Like we know a lot of men that are completely unaware. They don't ever want to admit their feelings about anything because they were taught feelings are for women and not for men. Sex is a release for them, where women, yes, it's a release for us, but we also want to feel that intimacy. And men that aren't tapped into their own feelings don't really care about that. Does that make sense? Like I dated a guy that just was like, why does it need to be intimate? Like during sex. And I'm like, what? It goes back to that whole, like where we're still at as a society, where men have to, men and women do have different roles, and people will get into the whole biblical stuff of all that. And I was raised in the church, so I know all of that. But at the end of the day, I have a, you were raised to believe men were all pigs, right? That's just an old school mindset because of a limitation or a limiting belief or something that happened to your mom or her mom, and that was passed down. And then there's so many men that are still shamed for being depressed. Women are too, but there's so many more men that I know of that are shamed for feeling depressed, feeling upset, grieving any loss in their life,
like
right?
Toxic masculinity. It's
right.
Like,
like feeling that they're not allowed to have feelings because if they do, they're too emotional. And that means if they're emotional, now that means something about their gender or their sexual orientation, right? Like people do that, right? Like you ever heard somebody like, oh my God, he whines all the time, right? He must be, gay or something like that. And it's like, what does that, one has nothing to do with the other, but that's what society has done. And so a lot of men, the sex addiction can be a release for them because they don't know how to handle their own, right? Their own, like Bria, you had it, Faith, you had it. It was not having your own inner awareness or wanting to face your own feelings with things. So it's a release. Just like Sydney said, with any addiction, it's to fulfill something, right? Yeah. Or, to feel better.
Yeah.
So
it's also a conditioning too.
Yes.
Can I ask somebody this? Please don't answer this if you don't feel comfortable. I feel like everybody's comfortable in their sexual identity at this point. Is anybody bisexual? Does anybody swing for the Bria? Yes. Okay. So can you explain to, like, is it the emotional, like the intimacy between woman and woman? What was that experience for you? I want to know because I don't know it personally.
Well, I was kind of cracking up, Kat, because you're like, oh, I'm going to switch sides. I'm like, it don't work that way. Whatever problems you have,
it doesn't work. It definitely doesn't. Like, I can't. I honestly can't. I really couldn't. And it's no judgment at all. I'm just saying, like, I like the thingy.
Also, by the way, an abuser as a male is very different than an abuser as a female. So when I got I've been in 2 partnerships with women. I've been in a very abusive relationship with a man. One was abusive with the woman. And it was like more emotional, psychological, which is what I find women tend to do, is more emotional, psychological abuse. Yeah. So it's still, those problems are still there. So if somebody's over here going, oh, men are so complicated, which by the way, I think they're actually pretty simple. I think we're the complicated ones. And I hate to like put us under, throw us under the bus or anything, but I do.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm as complicated as they come, y'all. I'm 100. I am a hot ass mess. I can't with my brain. I can't.
Yeah. Speaking to being bisexual, gay, whatever that is, it's for a long time I didn't have attraction to men. I thought I was completely lesbian. And that was more my sexual trauma playing a role. I actually very much am attracted to men. I do like the penis, let's just be real. But I had this very strong attraction. It's a soft touch and the soft essence that women have. It's a motherly essence that I think that I was missing. And there's a thing about how women take their time in bed and they move really slow. So for somebody who had sexual trauma, it was a lot easier for me to get intimate with a woman for a long time. And it's only been as of recent that I've been able to have sex with men again. So
wow. That's
I think
amazing.
too, that wouldn't that be the closest we will ever be able to come to being with a partner that can almost read our mind, like by just being with a partner that is of the same gender, or at least has the same sexual turn-ons, like our deepest desires that we just wish we could just, but not have to tell them, like they just do, because we're women and we want people to.
Y'all are making me
question. I'm going to get a bunch of texts later tonight about this. She's going to be questioning herself.
It's all true. It's not easy. I'm not easy. I'll be like, do I love women? Listen, I think that everybody I really do feel that everybody should ask themselves that question. Yeah. I do, because I was talking with a family member and she was saying to me, a relative, and she was like, I asked myself at one point, because I found myself being attracted to one of my best friends. And I was like, oh my God. Am I I don't think, and it's no judgment. Like, it's like, that's great. Good for you. I think you should explore that, because maybe it would be a
normal
experience.
Thing. I think it's normal, like at some point in your life to be like, But I also think, like, I want to bring up okay, we know plenty of women that have been with other women that are not bisexual, right? Like they've just done it for the fun, like sex thing, or for their partner, or for a film or pornography or whatever. It's their body. They can do what they want. But there's also that stigma. A woman can be with a woman and not be bisexual or lesbian. But then if you hear a man was with another man, that means he's automatically gay or bisexual. And Michelle could probably speak to that a lot, right? I'm sure you've heard that a lot. And so it's, you know, but I think it's normal to ask yourself that. If you're not asking yourself that, at some point in your life, you might be like, I mean, I love men. Like, I love them. I mean, I hate them too, but I love men. But there were times in college where I knew like girls that were experimenting, and I'm like, do I want to do that? I would ask myself that. And then I came to my own conclusions, and I didn't. But at the time, it was easy to feel weird or shame myself. Well, but do I want to be like, is that something that I want to explore? Is it just a sexual thing? Is it a feeling thing? Right, Bria? Like, it's not right.
I was going to say too, it's like with these women, I could see myself marrying them. I could see myself having a family with them. So it's a little different than I just want to have a sexual experience. It's I want to have a lifelong intimacy with this person, share my life with them, and share my family. So it's a little bit different.
I can definitely comment on this myself. So I've definitely questioned and explored it myself. And for me, it was like, it goes back to the intimacy. Like I can have intimacy with another woman and the emotional connection. But then when it comes to the sexual stuff, that's where it's like, maybe this isn't for me as much as I thought it was.
Right. I'm like Karina. I feel like Karina, like I can connect emotionally, but when it comes to the point of like, let's, take this to the next level. Here's the thing though, this is going to sound really strange. So I know that we're in a judgment-free zone, but I think women being together intimately, and I don't mean this in a pornographic way. I mean this like in a very beautiful way. Like it's a beautiful thing. Like I really do. I find it to be very lovely, and that's just how I feel. But I can't do it myself. Like I can't bring myself to do it. I'm just like, that's where I stop.
Sister. You are not gay.
No, definitely not.
Bria's telling you.
Personally.
Well, Cindy was going, okay, a girl, is that the closest you get to somebody reading your mind as a girl? But the mind is so complex that my current partner, you're describing relationship with your parents is how my relationship currently goes. So it's like he can literally read my mind, and there'll be moments where I'm like, dude, just go surf, go leave me, I want to go right. And at the exact same moment he's like, hey, I'm gonna go surf now. I'm like, oh, that was so easy.
It's not mind reading, it's witchcraft.
And I think too, it's like the soul connection at the end of the day. Like when you feel aligned and it's great.
Yeah, as much as like cliche this sounds or old fashioned this sounds, the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus has been really good at helping me understand, how to have those kind of relationships that you guys are describing.
Does anybody else have anything to say about sex addiction? What's your last thoughts on sex addiction?
Well, I think that like automatically when we hear the term sex addiction, like you were saying, we go to like sex, and I had that thought originally too, is like, okay, sex addiction, always wanting to have sex, but like we can, like as a sex addict, can fill those holes, pun intended, with porn and reading graphic novels and the withholding sex or like that's something that we don't think about all that often. Is it's the term sex addiction is not always so literal, which is really interesting.
I love that pun. Thank you for that. That's that's right up my alley. Bria, you had final thoughts?
I just want to leave with a message, and this is more of a message from somebody who's gone through it, who's healed on the other side. And the message that I really want to give is that if you're experiencing sex addiction, one, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's definitely something that can be healed through learning intimacy. And then two is that like at the end of learning intimacy, when you actually do it, it feels a lot better than just having sex and being pounded. Like, honestly, it feels so good. It's the most relieving and amazing experience. And now I'm actually in a healthy relationship. So I can speak from that perspective of this is way better. So I just want to leave with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Faith? final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that you said that you read those romance novels and that erotica when you were younger. Could that possibly be like what your expectations are now with your relationships and stuff, is because you brought that in and you were like, I want it just like this, because that's like...
Yes, totally could be, because I am like, oh my God, I want to meet the biker in the middle of Rhode Island who,
right?
Oh God. Oh no.
Who has this like sensual side to him, you know?
Oh no, don't.
But no, I agree with Bria. Like if you feel like you have a sex addiction, don't put the shame on it. Like, go seek help. Find people that understand you. Find people that are willing to help you and not use it against you. And that's the biggest thing, is a lot of people are afraid that people are going to use it against you.
Totally. No, I totally agree. I'm taking a lot away from that, because it's hard. It's not easy. Like, it's not an easy thing. I mean, if it is,
I think it's ever changing. Like, every day you have to work at it every day.
Right.
It's any addiction. It's like any addiction.
I think it's just being human as well. Every day you have to work at being a better version of yourself. You can't just think of, oh, yesterday that was good enough. I read 5 pages in a self-help book, I'm good to go for the next 5 years. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Yeah, no. Evolving is a daily journey.
Yeah. Michelle, do you have final thoughts, last thoughts?
I do. I mean, the thing about addiction is, to classify it, it is only a problem. So where we may, sex is one of those taboo topics that, just anything that diverts from the social norm may look like an addiction to a person, but an addiction has to be identified by that person, like I think Sydney said, and it has to affect their lives. So either you're getting arrested, so it's affecting your ability to abide the law. It is affecting you socially. So someone in your family or your significant other is having a problem with it. It is affecting your ability to go to work. So it has to really affect all facets of your life for it to even be an addiction. Someone may not like what you do, but that's not a reason to classify it as an addiction. It could be something that isn't necessarily socially acceptable. There is some place in Southern California where people can go and literally there's a hole in the wall, guy puts his part in and something occurs on the other side.
What?
Never heard of this before. I wish I remembered the term. So
glory hole. It's a glory hole.
Yeah, the glory hole. Yeah, because I was thinking of that movie.
And so it may not be something you like, but if it's there and it's not, he can go to the glory hole and come home and go to work the next day, and he doesn't have a significant other that has a problem with it, and there's no law enforcement, is that necessarily an addiction?
Yeah, it could just be a lifestyle choice. I know lots of polyamorous couples, people who are okay with other people having sex in their relationship, and they're really happy.
For me, it's like once it becomes not a choice anymore, that's when it becomes an addiction. Like when it's the same with using, when it at first, so we said that, the first thing or the last thing, the drugs, and drugs can be anything here. It can be narcotics, it can be sex, it can be video games. The last thing they take from you is your ability, your freedom, and the first thing you get back is when you choose to put that stuff down. So when you feel like you have no choice, that your life will be affected, or your ego, your spiritual, your self-esteem, like when it becomes a have to and not a want to, that's when it becomes an addiction. And that's why we can only determine if we're addicted to something. Someone can't tell us that.
Yes. Natalie, do you have last thoughts?
Anybody that is dealing with a sex addiction, if they're asking about it, or they have someone in their life that like it's affecting them, right? Like if their partner is addicted to sex, it's not something to be ashamed of. That's what we do. We shame all addictions now, right? So just like the drug, don't be ashamed of it, but recognize it and then start to do the steps to get the help that you need. If this is an addiction that is an addiction and it is affecting your life and the life of your family or your significant other, then it's time to, it's time to seek help and therapy and go that route and find out where it stems from and try to, not replace it with another addiction, but help, like really help yourself with it. And sex addiction can happen to anybody. That's like my other thought. Remember Halle Berry and that guy she was married to? Everyone's like, how could he cheat on Halle Berry? And then he's like, I'm a sex addict. And people are like, oh, that's just an excuse, but maybe he was, right? Like maybe he really was. That was a different time where that wasn't really talked about a lot, but you can be, it has nothing, sex addiction has nothing, just like any addiction. It doesn't have any biases. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter,
there's no discrimination.
There's no discrimination against, right? And if you're a woman and you have a man in your life that is addicted to sex and you think it's because of what you look like, or they're telling you they're not attracted to you because you gained weight or something like that, that's not about you at all. And so I just don't want, and vice versa. If you have a woman, if you're a man with a woman with a sex addiction, she's saying, you're not good looking enough for me anymore, or something like that. That's their own projections for not dealing with their own addiction. So don't take that on as your own, or think that, because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have somebody use, sex as a weapon against me to hurt me, and make me feel like I was nothing to them because of that. But the reality is that was all his issues. So, so that's just my final thoughts, because I don't want people to think it's wrong to have the addiction. And then like, shame themselves or their significant other, whoever it is that has the addiction in their life. So
I think it's just about going in and getting the help that you feel that you need, without taking the shame with it. Like, like if you feel in yourself that this is bad, it's harming your family, it's harming this, you're not able to do this or you're not able to do that. I'm great at, like, I can contain things and put them in boxes and just without taking the shame or anything. It's not necessarily good or bad. It just is. It's fact. What's happening. This is what's going on. This is, and now I need to fix the is.
I was just thinking that today. You're like reading my mind today, Faith, because I was like, it's fact. Like all it is like fact. If we just looked at it as like, this is a fact. Like this is a fact. There's nothing
so much
more to
emotion to it though. And emotion, like it keeps it triggering and keeps it going. And it's like, oh my God, I can't tell a soul because I'm going to think I'm a horrible person. My kids are going to be astounded at me. My parents know, what are the tabloids going to say? Like, depends on what your status is in society. Like all these things you carry with you.
Yeah.
Of course, like we talked about in a previous episode, like there's levels to all the statuses. Like,
yes,
I feel like I'm just playing a level game.
level up. Lori, last thoughts?
I would say, to reiterate a lot of what Natalie and Faith said about, not feeling shameful about it, and, when it's time and it's impacting your life, that it's really time to seek some help to figure out what it is that this addiction is really trying to fill the hole for.
Yeah. Karina?
So I don't really have much experience or knowledge in this area, but I will say I agree with a lot of what Sydney said, because my ex-husband, when we first started dating, we broke up because I believed that he had a sex addiction. But what ended up happening is when we got married, it looked like he was done with that, but it just translated into a work addiction. And then from there, it translated into actually a marijuana addiction, which was a real addiction because it did affect his life. It made him not be able to go to work and stuff. And then from there, it turned into an alcohol addiction, and then after that, we divorced. So I agree with what everybody else says. I also think that, maybe don't trade one addiction for another addiction. Really spend the time to do the work to heal, because there's certain addictions that our society actually accepts and like praises, such as work addictions, but you may just be exchanging one thing for another addiction.
That's so true, especially the work thing. That's 100% true. I've fallen into that trap. Natalie, I'm working. I'm working so much. I mean, it is, because when it starts affecting your relationships around you, that's a problem. That's like you said, when it starts impacting everything around you, it's a problem. So,
but how does that person know? Like, how does that person take the steps to figure it out? Is it just that they have to go on their own personal journey? Like that's the hardest thing is like everyone around you can see your own addictions before you do, or
You have to hit your bottom.
Yeah.
Like you have to go, you like
hit the rock bottom.
Right. Okay. Here's an example. I'm really sorry, honey. I know that you don't like the smell of cigarette smoke, so I'm going to stop smoking for you.
Mm-hmm.
That never works.
No.
Ever, and it has to be for yourselves. People say it all the time when they come in. I want to get my kids back. I'm court ordered to be here. I'm going to stop using for 90 days. Once I get out and my papers are signed, I'm never coming back and I'm going back, but I'm just going to use a different drug.
Right.
It's cocaine that I can't use. So I'm going to go use heroin. Heroin's a better option. It's easier to hide. No, it's not actually. And it's way worse, but that's why we choose these different addictions. We choose these different outlets to fill the holes, and it can surface anywhere and everywhere.
You cannot overcome it for someone, because I tried that. I tried that with my friend, 8 a.m, hitting the bottle until like 3 a.m. the next day.
Mm-hmm. That's why addiction is called a family disease.
Yeah, it is a family disease. It came from generations. And I'm like, what can I do? Because I was asking my other friend who is a former addict to the same thing, to alcohol. And she's like, you can't. Yeah. Like you can't do it for you can't do it for them. You just can't.
And that's why there's also programs out there that Sex Addict Anonymous probably has one. I know for a fact there's one for AA and NA. It's Al-Anon and Nar-Anon. It's Narcotics Anonymous for the affected family members. So if you've had an alcoholic parent or a drug addict wife or something like that, they go in and they work steps too, because it affects everyone. And the first step is the only step that can be taken alone. That's one of the scary. It's kind of like when we go down a dark, scary road or something, and in a neighbor, that's a term we use in the rooms too, is like our minds are like the dangerous neighborhoods. We don't want to go in them alone, and that's why they get sponsors to work with them. Someone who's gone through the steps prior, so before them, they have experience, so they can hold their hand and walk them through it. But no one can help you. Like we can walk you through working a first step, but it's all going to be you.
Yeah.
I got a big question on that one. So, and I get the steps. I've had a few family members and stuff that have went down those routes and stuff. And everyone that has been in those programs have stated that it was easier for them to get drugs and alcohol in the program than it was for them on the outside.
Those are people they're looking for drugs. Like if you find what you look for is another in the rooms too. Like if you're looking for recovery, you're going to hang out with the right people. But there are definitely, and I heard of one person that did their 90 days and then they were standing out in the parking lot selling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know years ago, my brother was sentenced to one because he had gotten stopped by the police, whatever. It was affecting his life. Like it was for, I think it was just for alcohol, but I'm not 100% sure. It could have been for drugs and alcohol. I was pretty young when he went in there, but he was in there for like 90 days. And he has said that he had like the people that were running the place were actually giving them the alcohol and the drugs and things like that. And I've had cousins that said the same thing. It was their sponsors that were giving it to them. Yeah. So, and I know that people come in and they target people because whatever.
It's very easy. If you're still living in that, if you're still living in dis-ease and your disease,
right,
and you're going to find the people that are too. We attract similar people for a reason. But I know I'm friends with hundreds of people who have, like my dad personally, he has 26 years, and it's got to be for you,
right.
Some of it works. Some people stick and stay, and then it takes 90 days and they're like, you know what, this is freaking awesome. I can sleep. I'm not hurting all the time. I've got a job. I'm getting my kids back, and then there are other people who are like, this is killing my party. And we'd like to say that they're just not ready yet and that they will come back. But we do have a time in every meeting where we pray for the people who aren't there and the people who won't make it.
And I'm just asking these questions for people that might be listening that have an addiction, that are trying to figure out what their next steps are, or even if they have one, if they feel like they think that they might possibly have one, then for them to help them. So I like to look at all aspects of the equation.
Yes.
These programs do not cost any money. They have a donation basket, but it does not cost money.
It just costs your commitment.
Right.
Anything from Right.
Right. And I was going to say, I haven't been through any of these 12-step programs, by the way. I'll just let you guys know that I've been through therapy. I've been through, I've had alternative healing. I was a big hippie for a long time, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so what I was going to say is that next step for me, Faith, of, admitting that I had a problem was number one. It was like, okay, I have a problem. It's affecting my life. I'm getting in trouble. Losing my partners. My partners are breaking up with me. They pretty much hate me. I hate myself at the end. So what do I do now? And when I finally reached, and I did, I think the next thing was weed. I'm a workaholic. It was cigarettes. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that I just kept piling on. And eventually it had to be, what is it that I really want to say? Where did I really get hurt in my childhood that I wanted to say to my parents, that I really wanted to say to my family members or to whoever it was? And I go through a whole tapping thing, like people do things differently. But what came out of it was me feeling like I was just not good enough to be loved, to be seen, to be heard. And so I think the next level is, what am I avoiding saying? And what is the root of what it is that I want to say to these people, right? That's where it lies.
Yeah.
I actually have something to say as well. So, I mean, I've talked about this on my videos. While I don't think I was like in a full blown alcoholism, there was a point in my life where I was abusing alcohol, and I was worried that
me too,
I may have to go to a program or something. I never ended up attending a 12-step program or anything myself either. However, like you were saying, Bria, I really reflected on what's really going on. And I started healing, and I did tapping as well. Tapping really helped me, journaling, really just diving in and reflecting on what was really going on, what I really needed, what hole was needing to be filled, what I was looking for, and what I was avoiding. Because for me, it was an avoidance thing. I was avoiding something.
Yeah.
And now, where I'm at now, I can have wine with friends and it not be an issue. But like I said, I don't think I was in full blown alcoholism, but there was definitely this stage where I was like,
yes, Karina, me too. When I left my abusive relationship, that was when my little rally started for like 6 months. I was like I was going to brunch. I was like trying to cover up the pain with like trying to numb it in a way. And
that's what it was for me too.
Yes.
And mine was right after my narcissistic relationship as well. I slipped into this like really awful place.
Yes.
But I was in a narcissistic abusive relationship, and afterwards I wasn't eating at all because my nerves were shot. And then I was just going like you, Kat, going out, having drinks, doing that. And that can spiral, but it was situational at the moment, but that could have spiraled if I had continued it. So,
right. And watch who you're, I had to like assess who I was surrounding myself with. I'm like, I had to cut it out. Like I literally had to remove this person because I'm like, this isn't
your bad behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this person wasn't helping themselves.
That's a really big thing when people like, and I can only speak to the 12 steps. I took my first steps in an NA clubhouse, learned my colors off the key tags. Dad got clean when I was a baby. And so I'm very like, I know all the language. I've attended meetings myself as a member. And like one of the biggest things that can hinder our recovery is when we come in and we decide, okay, now I want to do better for myself. And then we still try and kind of like manage to stand over the line of these are my friends that I used to do bad things with, and now these are my new friends. So I'm going to live recovery and talk recovery during the meetings, but then go and I'm not going to use, I'm just going to hang out with my friends while they use, or, I'm just going to use on the weekends or like those things. And it really is. That's kind of what I meant earlier when I was like, you find what you look for. So if you're not looking for recovery and you're not looking for that, and that can sometimes be subconscious, we can outwardly say, I want to get clean. I want to do better. I want to heal whatever is going on. I want to be a better person, but our mind, our subconscious is still dragging us to those things. And that can be heartbreaking.
I can relate with all of that because afterwards, after my relationship, I ended up getting a job as a bartender because I had experience of that. And I was in the scene all the time. So you guys are saying like my experience lasted 6 months. My experience lasted like 3 years. And it was when I was bartending, when I was like hanging out with the wrong people. And then the same thing happened. It was like afterwards, and I was like, okay, this has got to stop. I was still hanging out with the same people and I was still bartending at nights. And it was just like, you really have to change, not to change yourself, but you do have to change your environment as well if you want change.
Yeah. 8 strangers on the internet coming together for intimate conversations about difficult topics with soft hearts and strong voices. This is Red Lips and Mic Drops.
Red lips and mic drops, thick hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk. Red lips and mic drops, thick hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk.